It might be a beautiful place, but sometimes beauty hides dark secrets, and when the shadows of the Pacific Northwest stretch long, anything is possible. Olympic National Park and Gifford Pinchot National Forest, two lush, untamed stretches of wild land, are more than just picturesque destinations for hikers and explorers. Beneath the towering trees, through thick fog, and across rugged terrain, there are those who claim they've seen things no one can explain, creatures they can't name, and a government intent on keeping it all from the public. Two stories, eerily similar in their strangeness, yet separate in time and place, uncover something surprising. Nothing about this wilderness is as it seems. Step into the abyss and welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and join our ever-growing community of the curious. Your support is the lifeblood that keeps this channel alive. Now, prepare yourself, for what you're about to witness is not for the faint of heart. I've been racking my brain about whether to share this, but it's been eating at me for a good while. I once took part in a volunteer search and rescue operation out in Olympic National Park, Washington State. This was in mid-November, right around the time you start feeling that damp cold settle in for the winter. I'm emailing you now because my gut keeps telling me something's off, and I don't trust official channels to give the full story. The Park Service, maybe even more than that, some government arm, I guess, seems eager to brush it all under the rug. So here's how it started. A park ranger named, actually, I'll just call him Ranger M for privacy, went missing while doing a routine patrol near the Bogachiel Peak area. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal at first. These guys are out in the wilderness constantly, and folks sometimes lose radio contact for a day or two if they venture into the deeper backcountry. But after 48 hours, people started getting nervous. Colleagues said he was usually good about daily check-ins, especially with the weather turning sour. I'm on a local volunteer list for the search and rescue squad, so I got the call. We had about 20 folks, SAR volunteers, a few park employees, and a smattering of local law enforcement, divided into smaller search teams. The rumor was that they'd also looped in a few guys from Joint Base Lewis McChord, but I only spotted a couple of unmarked vehicles near the ranger station and some men who looked more specialized than your everyday volunteer. I didn't see patches or insignias. They had that kind of stiff, no-nonsense posture you usually associate with military. Anyway, my group of 5 was assigned to check some lesser-used trails near the Hoh River Valley. We picked that route because it's known for quick-rising streams and tricky footbridges, places a person might have gotten stranded or taken a bad spill. It was cold, damp, everything coated with moss the way it usually is in that rainforest corridor. The walkie chatter among the teams was mostly about normal stuff at first, downed trees, bear scat, that sort of thing. But as we pressed further up along an unofficial spur trail that heads toward the Bailey Range, we started noticing old footprints, really large footprints, and I don't think they were from normal hikers. They seemed too wide, almost like something was dragging the front edge of the foot. Honestly, I assumed it was a bear sliding around in the mud, but it had this weird shape to it that I couldn't quite place. We spent the better part of the day picking our way through underbrush, trying not to twist an ankle on wet logs. One of our group members, an older guy who's done SR for years, commented that the forest was quieter than usual. Fewer bird calls, not as many squirrels or chipmunks scurrying around. Sometimes it's just how it goes, but he said it gave him an uneasy feeling, like something was out there, maybe a big predator. Late in the afternoon, we got a call on the radio that another team had found something near the Bogachiel River forks, some kind of large bones. No sign of the ranger, but definitely a large skull. Well, we half-joked that maybe they'd found the Bigfoot skeleton. The radio silence that followed was eerie. It wasn't a light-hearted conversation. Normally, there would have been some banter. An hour later, we met up with them. They'd set out fluorescent markers in a tight perimeter around a small rock overhang that was maybe 50 yards off the main trail, hidden by heavy brush. Turned out, they'd discovered more than one skull. They had found two large skulls, like something that might be in a museum exhibit. If I had to guess, they were nearly twice the size of an average human skull, though shaped similarly. No elongated snout like a bear or canine. Both had partial jaws attached, and the teeth they looked almost human, but with canines that were slightly too long. Our immediate reaction was that they must be old indigenous remains, or an animal with a bizarre deformity. I know, it sounds insane, but the energy around that site was suffocating. We were all spooked. Our team lead radioed the finding in, and after some static-laden back and forth, we were instructed to hold the area. There was no mention of Ranger M in that exchange, which seemed odd. European and American explorers and traders logged multiple alleged man-eating incidents along the Pacific Northwest coast, citing a mysterious cannibalistic tribe at the heart of local lore. Yet, when the skulls were finally examined, they appeared to not be that old, leaving everyone uncertain as to their true origin. Weird part is, after some time, some official-looking folks showed. Mind you, we were deep in the park. They wore dark green jackets, no name tags that I could see, and one older guy who had a distinct East Coast accent kept telling us we'd done our job and should move along. Just like that. He didn't say, thanks. Didn't say, this is huge. Just told us to go home. One of our group kept politely asking if they were going to test the remains, contact local tribal authorities, that sort of thing. The older official sort of nodded, but his eyes were elsewhere, scanning the trees. Then one of the others abruptly mentioned they needed confidentiality because of an ongoing investigation. No further explanation. They loaded those skulls into some heavy-duty containers and took off. We never saw them again. That was the first sign something bigger was going on. The next sign came when we regrouped at the Kino Ranger Station the next morning. We expected a briefing on Ranger M's disappearance, an update on the remains, or at least a next step plan. Instead, the higher-ups told us the search was called off due to weather conditions and safety. There was a huge front blowing in, yes, but calling off a search for one of their own that quickly is not normal. They said they'd reach out if we were needed again. A few of us pressed for details, but they just repeated the same lines about danger, liability, and how they had a special operations team coming in. That's when it hit me. We were being pushed out. They didn't want us snooping. We never got official word on whether Ranger M was found, dead, or alive. Talk among the volunteers was that some personal effects, maybe a uniform patch or a name badge, were found near that rock overhang. But nobody would confirm that on record. One volunteer claimed he overheard radio chatter that a battered, unrecognizable body was pulled from the area around Bogachil Peak 2 days later, but I can't prove that. All I know is that my phone calls to the ranger station have been going straight to voicemail, and the few times I got someone on the line, they claimed they had no idea what I was talking about. It's like Ranger M never existed, or his case has become taboo to discuss. Now, here's what's been bugging me. I've lived in the general region of Western Washington my whole life, and I remember my grandfather, a retired logger from Forks, telling stories about giants in the woods. He'd say that sometimes, during the darkest nights, you'd hear these bone-rattling howls echoing through the forest, and occasionally, loggers would find footprints too large to be from any known wildlife. He believed the government systematically covered up evidence of giant skeletons in the area to protect logging interests or something along those lines. I used to roll my eyes at that, thinking he'd just had one too many campfire whiskeys. But now I'm starting to wonder if there's a shred of truth to those tales. Because honest to goodness, those skulls looked unnervingly human, albeit on a giant scale. And that hush-up reaction from whoever took them away? It was so immediate, so matter-of-fact, that I'm convinced there's something more to it. I also heard a rumor, likely just local chatter, that there's an underground facility somewhere near Mount Storm King, connected by old Cold War-era bunkers. Some folks claim the government uses it to store classified specimens, including cryptid remains or even UFO debris. I have zero proof, but it's not the first time I've heard about hidden facilities in or around national parks. If there really is something out there, giant or otherwise, maybe that's where they'd send it. All I know is a well-respected park ranger is missing under bizarre circumstances, and I have a sinking feeling the truth isn't going to make it out to the public in any official capacity. Maybe Ranger M stumbled upon one of those remains himself and got on the wrong side of something beyond normal understanding, or was a victim of something bigger prowling those old growth forests. I'm sharing this with you and your YouTube channel because you're known to give these kinds of experiences some airtime without dismissing them outright. If there's a cover-up afoot, it won't be the first time we've seen that sort of thing with unusual discoveries in national parks. Have you come across anything similar? I'm not looking for fame or a fight with the authorities. I just think people deserve to know what's really going on out there, even if it's only to be cautious or to keep an eye out for themselves. I've rehashed this story a dozen times in my mind, and it still doesn't all line up in a nice, tidy package. But that's what I saw. That's what happened. And now I'm caught between wanting to forget it ever happened and needing to get it off my chest. Let me know if you want more details, and I'll try to fill in the gaps as best I can. So, there it sits, tucked away between the moss-covered trunks and the whispering breeze, a tale of strange shapes slipping through the firs, and of an official silence that perhaps speaks louder than any explanation. If the footprints are real, if the bodies were recovered, what else might still be out there in that deep green wilderness? Maybe the only way to know for sure is to set foot on those same hidden trails, though one wonders what you might find when the daylight fades. I'm not even sure how to begin, but I've been pacing for days trying to figure out if I should email you at all. Something happened during my time in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. This was years ago, but it's like it's etched in my head. The images, the sensations, even the tension in the air. I haven't told many people because either they think it's a tall tale or, worse, they give me that polite nod that says they don't believe a single word. But I need to put it all out there. I first visited the area in the summer of 1992, tagging along with a group of older friends who were real outdoorsy types. I remember it was mid-July because we had that streak of uncharacteristically sunny days right after the 4th. We set up near Council Lake, just off Forest Road 23. The plan was simple enough: do some fishing, maybe hike around a bit, and definitely not stay tethered to any itinerary. We were just there to wander. On our second evening, we'd been winding down, picking at the leftover hot dogs from lunch, when someone mentioned feeling like we were being watched. I can't say who said it first because it was more a shared vibe, like the forest had eyes. We had that sense of collective unease, but nobody admitted it outright. Then, while walking to rinse out a pan in the lake, I thought I saw a figure moving at the tree line. At the time, I passed it off as my eyes playing tricks in the twilight. But the silhouette, tall, definitely taller than a normal man, just seemed to slip behind the trunk of a huge Douglas fir, so quietly I wasn't sure if it was even real. Over the next few days, random bits of strangeness piled up. Animal sounds suddenly going quiet, footsteps on pine needles, but never a visible person. A friend said they glimpsed a shape crossing the forest floor around dusk, describing it as a massive humanoid, though no one pressed for details, probably out of fear of ridicule. I recall specifically overhearing them talk about the length of its arms, how they swung oddly low. But the rest of us tried to laugh it off. Maybe we were spooking each other out. Or maybe it was all those talk radio shows about Bigfoot that used to run late at night. Anyway, on our last morning, one of us, a guy I'll call Mark, woke me up in a panic, saying we needed to break camp. He had gone to gather some fallen branches for the fire pit before sunrise and discovered enormous footprints in a patch of soft soil by the lakeshore. He was so shaken he refused to go back. None of us questioned him too hard, seeing the actual size of those prints, roughly 18 inches long, spaced in a stride bigger than any I'd seen, was enough to kill our appetite for adventure. We packed up quickly, and that was that. But it stuck with me. Fast forward to 2001. I was back in the region, helping a local volunteer group with a reforestation project near Mount Adams. We'd spend long days planting saplings and clearing trails of debris left behind by storms. There were occasional nights we stayed in a shared bunkhouse near Trout Lake. On one of those nights, a Forest Service employee, who was typically tight-lipped, admitted that they'd taken reports of large, unidentified bipeds more seriously than the public realizes. The rumor was there had been official investigations stretching back decades, not just by local rangers, but also by some hush-hush branch of the government. They said something about maintaining order and protecting the region's interests. I remember those exact phrases because it sounded too formal for casual conversation. It was implied that certain areas were off-limits to regular folks for reasons that never made it into public statements. Later, I heard an even stranger account linked to the aftermath of the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. This came from a longtime local who swore he saw the military carrying out large, hairy bodies alongside the typical rescue operations. He claimed no official mention was ever made, but that word spread among loggers, emergency crews, and local authorities. According to him, these creatures were bipedal humanoids and looked charred from the pyroclastic flows. Another volunteer who overheard the conversation just shook their head and walked away. It was as if they'd heard it all before and didn't want any part in confirming or denying it. In the years since, I've started paying more attention to every rumor, every snippet of conversation from hikers or rangers who talk quietly at local diners. I've met a couple of investigators who say the government definitely has a hand in suppressing certain sightings, particularly in prime hiking areas like the ones around Mount Adams, Goat Rock's Wilderness, and even up near the edge of the Yakima Reservation. They say it's about avoiding panic, or maybe preserving the forest's image for tourism, or some bigger reason altogether. It's never consistent, but always seems to circle back to not wanting these stories to go public. One time, I stumbled upon some old newspaper clippings that mentioned missing persons from that region whose cases were never resolved. Usually, the official stance is that they fell off a cliff or got lost, but a retired policeman claimed there'd been footprints found near at least one of the sites that didn't match any known animal. He suggested that search and rescue teams are instructed not to mention anomalies in their official reports. And I did see, with my own eyes, one such official form from the late 80s, with a section blacked out. I keep asking myself, what if there really are large humanoid creatures roaming these forests? And if so, why such a tight lid on it? Over the years, I've heard everything from potential government interest in studying them quietly, to theories about preserving a relic population of undiscovered primates, to more wild speculations involving undisclosed experiments. One old friend even mentioned something about interdimensional hotspots, pointing to the weird light phenomena occasionally reported near Mount Adams. I'm not saying I buy into every theory, but it's bizarre how many puzzle pieces seem to fit together once you start looking. The strangest part might be how quickly certain official agencies respond if you file the wrong kind of report. I heard about a family who claimed to see two large, upright figures rummaging through trash bins near a campground, and they actually called the local sheriff. The very next day, a group of men in unmarked vehicles showed up at the family's home to ask questions. The mother told me, much later, she got the impression they weren't local law enforcement because they flashed badges she didn't recognize. She was too scared to push the issue. I guess that's why so few people talk. There's an underlying sense that if you say too much, someone will come around asking you to stop. I wish I had conclusive proof, but all I have is a patchwork of sightings, footprints, and cryptic statements from people who arguably know more than they let on. Every time I go back, I get this feeling like the forest is layered in watchers, some that we know, some that we can't quite name. Anyway, I appreciate you letting me spill my guts. Your YouTube channel is one of the few places I feel might actually listen without automatically labeling me a crank. If any of your viewers have similar experiences in Gifford Pinchot or anywhere else in the Pacific Northwest, I'd love to hear about them. Maybe one day all these pieces will form a clearer picture, but for now, the real truth seems buried under a thick canopy of secrets and shadowy hands pulling strings. So, there it sits, tucked away between the moss-covered trunks and the whispering breeze, a tale of strange shapes slipping through the firs, and of an official silence that perhaps speaks louder than any explanation. If the footprints are real, if the bodies were recovered, what else might still be out there in that deep green wilderness? Maybe the only way to know for sure is to set foot on those same hidden trails, though one wonders what you might find when the daylight fades. My dear watchers, your presence is a gift. Thank you for your time, your curiosity, your courage. But remember, there are others who wander, unaware of the dangers that await. By liking this video and subscribing, you offer them a light in the darkness. Support our channel and keep the stories coming, simply by giving a thumbs up and subscribing and sharing.